All right, well, today we were working on my car hauler RV bus conversion here. So if you're unfamiliar with what this thing is, this is a 1989 Silver Eagle bus that has been converted into a car hauler. So the back half is garage, the front half is living quarters. We've got a lift gate in the back to lift the car up in there. We got cabinets on the bottom, generator, all the things you would find in an RV, and all the things you would find in a trailer, all packed into one bus. So it's a really neat setup because it's all in one. We don't have to bring a trailer with us or anything. It's all self-contained, and we put this thing to use, but throughout that time we have found some problems. As you would expect with something like this, there's going to be some teething issues to work out, and that is exactly what we need to do. So first things first, we need to get this thing moved over into the driveway so we're closer to the shop and our tools and all the stuff we need, and dive into fixing and upgrading this thing so we can start using it and enjoying it again. So we got to get the Fummins out of the way, which, speaking of the old Fummins here, the giveaway is still live on this, garagebuiltco.com. The support on this giveaway has been amazing. I thank you all so much. I'm so glad so many of you love this truck as much as I do. I'm going to be sad to see it go, but we've got some projects planned for this thing as well. We've got parts on the way for it. We've got some new merch coming soon, and we should be restocking the stuff that's sold out soon as well. So if you missed your chance to get what you wanted to get to enter the giveaway, you should have another chance before the giveaway's over. So jibber jabber, let's get this thing moved so we can get the bus moved so we can get to work on fixing this thing up. We got minimal daylight this time of year. We need to use all of it. Bus will fire up first try. I got faith in the old girl. Come on in here. Come on in.
Slow. Oh, there's some lights.
Oh, wait. Oh, I feel like the batteries are dying. Maybe this thing's dying.
Oh. Rig.
Like it's nothing.
Let her warm up.
Oh, I missed this thing, dude.
Yeah. Just like we left it.
I'm so ready to be back on the road with this thing. It's a good cruiser. So we're gonna get this thing moved over into the driveway, and then I'll give you a rundown of the plans, what we gotta fix on this thing, and then hopefully we can fix everything and then go test it out. We'll see. Dude, I forget how much I love this thing until I drive it around and go in and out of it, because it's almost out of sight, out of mind when it's sitting there. Obviously, it's very in sight,
Right.
but it's out of mind. You're just kind of like, that's the bus. It's there. I'm used to seeing it. But like,
Once it moves.
this thing is so cool, man. It's a big thing, and there's a lot of potential problem areas and whatever, but it's so cool.
You're gonna come alive.
Yeah. What? Oh, yeah.
You're gonna come alive. It's like, oh wow, it moves.
In it again, you're like, oh, it's so nice in here. And yeah, so we've done what, 3 trips with this thing?
3 or
4 maybe.
At least,
If
you count, starting to go there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we did OSW. It was fine. We took off for LS Fest in Bowling Green, Kentucky. It's a pretty far drive, and a good 5-6 hours into the trip, we had a power steering line failure, and it started leaking profusely. We limped it back home. We were filling up fluid every like 45 minutes. We'd have to stop and fill up fluid. So it was not an ideal scenario. I'm glad we chose to turn around and bring it back home, because it would have been a nightmare to try to make it there. And the problem is the lines go from the front here, we'll show you in a minute when we get this apart, all the way to the engine at the back. The front of the engine, which is at the very back of the bus, right? So that's 45 feet of line that like routes through the middle of the bus. Not the easiest thing to fix. In hindsight, I have some ideas, which is how we're going to try to fix it now. We're going to replace the lines, but just we'll get into that when we get there. The other thing we need to fix, so we went to OSW with the power steering leak because it's a short drive, you know. We weren't that worried about it. And now on that trip, we encountered a new problem. That was with the generator. So this has a Quiet Pack 75D. It's a 7,500 watt diesel generator. This thing's really neat because it runs off the same fuel tank as the bus, which is 150 gallons. So it's like, as long as you fill up before you get to the track, like this thing will go all weekend. However, it started just kind of fading in and out. Like you'd hear the stuff like the fan, whatever. It didn't really matter how much load we had on it. So I spent some time, found the owner's manual, started digging into this, and then we had to get to work on building the lean-to, I think. And I just kind of shelved it. So it's already still kind of taken apart in here. I got the bolts. So I'm going to dig back into this, see if we can't figure this out. There's a few ways we can troubleshoot it. There's a few things that could be a more so simple fix than like it actually needs to be rebuilt or something. I'm hoping that's not the case. I also want to replace the house batteries. I could upgrade them to some big AGM ones. We're going to take a look. We're going to dig in here. Moral of the story. So anyway, it sucks because we're losing daylight, but that's what we got lights for. So we're going to quit jibber jabbering. I'm going to quit jibber jabbering. We're going to get to it. So while I started working on taking the generator back apart so that I could access everything, Josue started working on tearing the front of the bus apart so we can get to these lines. This is something we didn't realize when we were stranded on the side of the road, that we could much more easily get to these lines through the headlight here than underneath. So I went ahead and pulled the side panel off that has basically all of the electronics for the generator, as well as the main panel, which has kind of all of the mechanical aspects of the generator. This gets us most of the way there to diagnosing this thing and seeing what we need to see. I also went ahead and pulled this makeshift battery box out of the way so we could get to those as well. All right, so here is our generator. You can see it's pretty straightforward. You've got just the 3-cylinder diesel mechanical injection here. We've put a new air filter, oil change, filter. We did all that before that trip. You can see our house batteries here. So we do know that these need to be replaced. They've kind of been giving us trouble from the start, and that could be part of our problem. But even when they were fully charged and this thing fired up fine, it was doing the same thing. So I'm not holding out hope that we can just replace these batteries and solve all our troubles. So basically we're diagnosing in here. So this is basically all the inner controls that are making this thing work, that are telling it, you know, when to output electricity, all of those things. But there's a couple of tests that we need to run with the exciter and things like that to see if one of these is bad or if something with the generator itself is bad. I've already tested with it running, and we're not getting 240 volts out of here, which is what we should be getting. We're getting like 30 or 60 maybe. And so we've got a problem somewhere. We just need to find it and fix it. Josue has got this pulled apart up here. You can see our little temporary catch basin we put in for driving this thing to OSW because we just needed to get there for that event. So basically what we're going to try to do here is, instead of pulling these out, getting them remade, putting new ones in their spot, we're basically going to leave these in there and try to get new lines made and just route them differently. That's going to be the simplest way to do it because these run right down the middle of the bus in like a trough all the way to the back. So trying to get those out would be not fun. It'd be terrible. So basically route new ones, call it a day. But we need to determine what fittings we need and how long we need them to make it to get them made to then swap them. So getting these lines off is not an easy task. These have been on here for probably 30 years. So me and Josue had to kind of work together on this one. He couldn't get enough leverage from the outside getting into it through the headlight. So he would feed the wrench on from the outside, and then I was inside, you know, in this very, very tight crawl space, tapping it with a hammer to finally get this fitting to break free.
Yes, sir. That was painful.
So crawling in there is not for the claustrophobic, but we got the front accessible one loose. We're gonna try to get the bottom one. Wrench and a hammer. If you can't get an impact on something and it seems like you can't get enough force, the tap, it's kind of like an impact. It's what an impact does. It shocks it instead of just constant torque. It's shocking it. So
shocking all.
it's shocking how well it works sometimes. So Josue went to work on trying to get this rear fitting loose. This one is a lot less accessible and a lot harder to get to, and equally as tight, but there's a couple of unions going on there, so I have faith that he can get this one off. Now, while he was working on that, I decided to move back to handling this generator situation. I basically need to set up a bunch of jumper wires to do a handful of tests to try to figure out what is going on with this thing. We're basically bypassing certain parts of it to see if those electrical components are the problem or if we have a deeper rooted problem that we got to fix. All right, well, cool thing, wires are numbered, which is neat. Bad thing, they're not necessarily in the same places. Maybe, slightly different schematic. That threw me for a loop. But at least the wires are numbered. So basically what we need to do now is fire this thing up and check the output voltage. We're basically bypassing the voltage regulator, and it should be kind of like a static amount of voltage. It should be above 60 volts. So if it's not above 60 volts, then this is probably fine, and we maybe have an issue elsewhere or an issue with the actual generator portion of things. So yeah, just diagnosing. The problem is the battery's dead. These batteries have been on their way out for a bit. As you can see, they are absolutely massive. So I called the parts store and they had one. They'll have the other one in the morning. So I'll go pick those up. These needed to get swapped out anyway. So we'll swap those out, try to fire this thing up, see where we're at. Josue, on his side of things, got the second line unhooked. So we basically need to take that 90 off the line, and that's going to be our line. So then I'll measure that and figure out, because we could just do a 90. Oh, you're right. You're right. Wow. Wow. Genius. Genius. All right. Well, we have our fresh batteries. Batteries have been the saga of the week. Let me tell you, to finish with the power steering line, we need to come back here and take it off at the engine side so we know what fitting we need back here, come up with a length, and then we can get our lines made and get those swapped in. But to do that, we got to open up the back, drop the liftgate down. The liftgate is powered by those batteries. So those batteries are a big hang up right now. So next step, get them installed, get them tossed in, start working on the generator side of things, get the liftgate opened up, yada, yada, jibber jabber, you know the deal, and get back to work. So I started working on swapping these batteries in. It's a little bit tricky because they are deep into this compartment and there are a lot of wires all meeting up in this same spot. So trying to get things loose without shorting out the wrench on the other terminal, definitely not easy. Definitely very challenging. So I got the first one unhooked, and then I decided to zip tie the cables up out of the way to kind of drag the second battery out so we didn't have a metric ton of cables that are hanging down in the way and we get them mixed up. I mean, they should really only go back on one way, but better safe than sorry to make sure we get this done correctly. So I got the back terminals loose so that I could drag the back battery out, and we've officially got both dead junk batteries out of our way. All right, old batteries, new batteries. The difficult thing is there's a lot of wires here. So trying to keep all those wires tucked up and not smashing into each other. Definitely want to clean this up. This is unacceptable for my standards when it comes to wiring, but one thing at a time. Let's get these new batteries in, see if we can get this generator fired back up. So I got the new batteries into place, got the first one tossed in there. These things are insanely heavy. I mean, as you would expect, they're about twice the size of a normal battery, so it's definitely a little bit of a challenge to lift this thing up into this compartment, but we got it in there. We're able to get the first two terminals hooked up roughly and then get the second battery in, get its terminals on, so then we could go back and tighten everything down. Now, luckily, somebody at some point put a wood box around these, so you don't have to worry as much about shorting with the wrench, but it's still very, very tricky to get these tight without potentially smashing the wrench into the other terminal. It's probably the hardest part of this whole process is just tightening these things up. Started in a while. I should be getting at least 60 volts, and I'm only getting 30 volts out of one leg. And the other side is just resistance.
I ain't going nowhere. I said.
Alright, so basically what we're doing here is we're doing a fixed excitation test. So we're basically bypassing the voltage regulator and we're reading the voltage coming out of essentially each leg. Now the first leg we tested was A-OK, so we're going to try to test the other leg and see what results we get there. Is this wire 11? So these tests basically require you to unhook a certain set of wires and then hook some jumper leads up to cross over and then read certain things with the multimeter. So we're basically reading directly out of the leg, and we got 60 volts, or actually 70 on the one, which is right about where it should be. But this one is not looking as good. So 18 volts on that one. So now we need to go figure out what. All right, well, we're at a bit of a diagnostic dead end here. We've gone through all the tests and procedures to kind of determine where our problem is. It seems like we've got a problem with two of our sensing wires, or one of them. One of them seems to be working fine, the other one not so much. So it could be as simple as a broken wire, but these wires go out and go to the other side of the generator, which we can't really get to with it in here. So I think either way, to go further, we've got to pull it out and get in there and see if we've got a broken wire somewhere. I would love to just get a new one with 0 hours that I don't have to worry about, but these things, these diesel, RV generators are hella expensive, like 10 grand to replace one. So we're going to try to fix this one. Plus, as Josue said, they don't make them like they used to. It's a solid rig, mechanical injection. It worked great when it was working. It's just not working. What kind of leads me to believe it's just an issue with that wire because it was so intermittent. But who knows? We'll see. But the next step is we need to figure out these hydraulic lines so we can get some made. We need to open up the back, which we can do now that we've got some fresh batteries in here. So
yeah, we did it so many times.
Like almost daily. I was like, what? So in the back here, there is a lot more room to get around and get to these lines and fittings than the front. This is the way easier section to do it from. Now, we haven't even really taken a look at these besides when we were adding power steering fluid over and over again on our trip back home. Technically, this thing actually takes oil for the power steering system, which is odd but convenient. If you've got oil for the engine, you've got oil for your power steering system. So Josue went ahead and started getting the lines disconnected so we could verify that they were the same in the back as they were in the front, and we could get our lines made. I'm gonna guess 10 and 12. Let's try it. Let's find out.
I mean,
all right.
We'll find out one way or another.
We've got the fittings. These are JIC fittings because this is like hydraulic hose. But we know what we need now. We know which fittings. We need to write it all down and then come up with a length and get them made. I'll do that tomorrow. But we're both debating which size this is. Josue thinks this is 8. I think this is 10, and the other one's the next size up. So it's either my guess 10 and 12, his guess 8 and 10. So we're gonna go try,
eyeball measurement.
Right. Even though AN and JIC are not the same, they'll screw in, so we can see if an 8 or a 10 screws on here. I'm conflicted. That's why I'm curious. I'm not confident in my.
I know it's one of those.
I'm not confident in my choice. I feel like I'm in between. So let's find out. Let's go to the old trusty dusty AN fitting toolbox here. Let's see.
Those rear ones were pleasant.
Yeah, comparatively.
Yeah.
You were right. It's 810. I was wrong. So 810. Let's write this down. All right, well, we've got our fittings squared away as far as what we need for our lines. We're pretty decided on, I think, 55 feet. The bus is 45 feet. And the gearbox, the steering box is at the very front, and the engine is more or less at the very back, with give or take a foot on either end. So that's 45 feet if it was a straight shot. Hopefully 10 feet's enough to account for any sort of, up, down, left, right routing we've got to do. I always overshoot it on line length because I'm afraid to make it too short, but I think that should do it. All right, well, we have our hydraulic lines here. Pretty straightforward, honestly. You know, it's just the smaller one is an 8 on each end and a straight on each end. So very, very simple hose, just long. And then the larger one has a 90, and this is for where it goes into the reservoir. So even the drop wasn't super critical to match up exactly. It's not a tight area. And then a straight fitting on the other end. So really, really pretty simple. Now, we did consider doing a hard line and soft lines, but it's a pretty big project for a part that really shouldn't be that much of a nuisance now that we're replacing them. It's just 30-year-old lines, you know? It's part of maintenance. So that being said, I'm gonna get the bus opened up and start looking for the best route to get through here and get up to the front with these lines. Well, that was not going to help us very much. All right, we got this thing all opened up. You can see how much storage is in here. But basically what we're looking at plan-wise here is there were already these heater hoses that were routed after the fact. You can see them there. You can see them there in this bundle that go pretty much all the way to the front. I assume it was the same kind of situation where they had a leak in a heater hose that was in that factory trough there, and instead of trying to dig it out of there and unseal that whole system, just routed it on the outside here. So ideally we'll do the same thing with these hydraulic hoses, just run them with these heater hoses up through here and up into the steering box. Could be simple, could be complicated. We won't know until we get started, but we'll figure it out one way or another. So after all the prepping and planning, it's time to tackle the part of this project I have been dreading the most, and that is routing these lines from the very back of the bus to the very front. It is a long way to go to route a couple lines. There's a lot of compartments that we've got to pass through, but I think we've got a good game plan. So we went ahead and made our hole in the front. We did 2 hole saw holes and then connected them so that we have basically a slot. Now the reason for this is we want to run from front to back with these lines. The box is more important. We have a little more leeway in the back to change things up. However, the back has the 90. So basically every single one of these holes is going to have to be connected to be able to fit the 90 through. So as we get to the second bulkhead, it's actually double layered. So there's a layer of steel basically that makes up the wheel well, the wheel arch, and then there's a thin layer of aluminum, which is the bulkhead between the compartments. So I went ahead and drilled the 2 holes in there. So this was a little bit tricky to get the hole saw all the way through both of them, but we got both holes drilled, and then we decided that we should potentially change up our game plan on how we're going to route this. We're getting a pretty good idea of where everything's going to go, and we might be able to do this and keep things a little cleaner. All right, we got our second pair of holes done. So there's holes for the heater stuff all the way back to here. We're gonna need one more hole set up through here, and then I think it's pretty much open suspension and engine bay back to the engine. So with our change of plans, we decided to basically start in the middle, route to the front through all these bulkheads, and then route to the back from there. That way we could route the 90 to the back. We don't have to route it through any holes because it should be all open through there back to the engine, and that just kind of minimizes how big we need to make these holes. We want to seal all this back up and make sure we don't get any water intrusion or things leaking in and out. So the smaller we can make these holes, the better off we're going to be. So we went ahead and pulled the hoses out from the front since we've changed up our game plan, and then started working on routing them from the back. So it's a bit of a tedious process. There's a lot of stuff going from the back of this bus to the front. You know, there's this bundle of wiring, there's those heater hoses. So it's a little bit tight to squeeze this power steering line in there, but we've made it up mostly to the front. Now we've got to route it through the wheel well area, which is going to be tricky in its own right. Obviously, we don't want it to get damaged by the wheel, but it's really the only place it can go. All right, we got our first line routed up from there all the way up to here. Oh!
Welcome. The clubhouse.
It's hilarious. Oh, that's so funny. He wouldn't even know he was in there.
Yeah, I can live in here.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You just gotta knock if I start the bus up and go to move it.
Make sure I'm not home.
I wouldn't even notice. So after Josue got settled into his new clubhouse, we got back to work on routing this second line. Obviously, this one's a little bit trickier because it's just getting tighter and tighter as we keep adding stuff to this bundle. But I mean, we're pretty much professionals by now. We know exactly how and where it needs to go and roughly how much line needs to be there because we have the other line to compare to. So all in all, it goes a bit quicker than the first one. All right, well, we've got our routing done from the middle forward. We still got to seal and grommet up the holes, and then they pop out here and here. So we're halfway, and like this was the hard part in a sense because, you know, we're routing it through multiple walls, multiple bulkheads, front to back. We don't really have any more bulkheads from here on, so that's the easier part. The downside is we don't have as much access. So Josue went ahead and zip tied them together with a little zip tie spacer in between them so they're not completely together all the way down. So now the pair is one. You can see we went a little long, but I think once it's routed, it'll be probably a little too long, but better safe than sorry, right? Luckily, I listened to Josue and I didn't go 60 feet. I went 55. But, you know. I said it before I got them made. I always overshoot line length whenever I'm making lines. It's one nice thing about having Josue make lines is he usually makes them the right size. I'm always like cautious, so I overshoot.
Don't jinx me.
So short of lifting the bus up, taking the wheels off, we really didn't know how we were going to get into this area to route these lines. Josue just managed to squeeze in here with the creeper. The bus is surprisingly low. For such a big vehicle, especially in the back where there's the whole drivetrain, it's very, very low to the ground. So he was able to squeeze in and get us roughly routed far enough to where I could reach in from the engine bay side of things and grab the power steering hoses and pull them the rest of the way through. All right, we made it to the back. We're about 5 feet longer than we needed to be, but that's okay.
You have a little slack out though.
Oh, I still got more.
Yeah, I still have slack, dude.
Oh.
Help me out. A little more.
Oh my God.
Alright, that's pretty good.
Oh.
Do I go on and see? Hey, better too long than too short.
I know, but man,
Oh man.
I should have gone 50 feet.
pull some slack in there and then, you know, route it nicely. No, we're here though.
We are here. I'm very excited we're here. I just wish I would have gone a little shorter. But we're back here. We did it. We made it from A to B.
That was fun.
Really was not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Knock on wood. It's pretty low. It's
Yeah.
like I was like,
And
I
it's
honestly,
low.
I'm not gonna lie. Coming out, I sucked in my belly.
Yeah.
That's how tight it was.
Dude, it's tight.
Hey,
Yeah, I
maybe
could have saved
maybe we
myself
could-
like $200 making them shorter. All right. Well, now that we have the lines routed back here, we've just got to secure them some way, clean up all this excess, and get them hooked up. It's not too bad to hook them up back here. It's a little tricky in the front. So I'm going to wait for Josue to get here, and we'll knock that out together. In the meantime, another upgrade I've wanted to do back here, you know, one of the neat things about the bus is it is huge, and there's a lot of room, and you have a lot of room in this work bay. But at night, you don't have a lot of light. They thought about that when they built the bus, and they put these work lights in on both sides here to illuminate the engine bay, and we've got a switch right here. Now, these used to work. This one doesn't work anymore, and the other one's toast. But basically, we've got everything to put lights back here, and we could light this up at night if we're trying to work back here. So it's a neat feature to have. We might as well use it, so I want to get that knocked out. So when it does get dark super early tonight, we have some built-in lighting to use. So they should be in here. Another lighting area we need to improve is in here. We have no 12-volt lights in here. Yeah, I bought a ton of lights and accessories and stuff to put in this thing. Yeah, so I've got these for the garage area. Probably get to that a little later. But first and foremost, we got these big 4-inch 12-volt work lights. So we're going to try to put maybe a few of these in there. See if we can get maybe 3 of them going. You know, one kind of in the middle over the valve cover area and then one on each side. That would be nice. So, yeah, let's pull the old ones out. So I got to work on removing the old lights. These things are very, very basic. I mean, they basically have brake light, turn signal bulbs, nothing special. They weren't very bright. They weren't really doing their job, and they were kind of in a weird spot. The place they were in wasn't really working for this engine setup and where things are. The one is just straight behind the air cleaner. So I got to work on installing some pigtails for the new lights, so that way once they were in there, all I had to do was connect them. I didn't have to do a ton of little wiring while I'm in there. I try to do as much wiring on the bench as I can to save myself time working on the vehicle itself. So I got the bracket mounted into place, I got the light mounted onto the bracket, and went ahead and screwed in the ground clamp, and then got to work on installing the rest of the lights. So we're doing one right in the middle here to shine right down on the front of the engine so you can look at the belts and things like that. And then one over here in this corner shining on kind of the exhaust, the turbo area. That's another area where there could be problems. Now, while I was working on that, Josue was working on connecting the hoses up at the front. Just like taking off the old hoses was a challenge, connecting the new ones is definitely not easy. This is a very confined space. It's kind of ironic. You would think that being a bus, you would have a ton of room and access to things, but you really don't. It's pretty tight in there. So he went ahead and got that hard 90 on the smaller hose so he could get that one connected, and then started working his way onto the larger hose, which is a little bit easier because it's at the front. So while he was doing that, I was hooking up the wiring. So one of the main reasons I decided to do this was that all the wiring is already here. All we've got to do is connect, splice, and hook it up to the lights. So pretty easy process, just doing a quick wire to make sure everything works before we tuck it all nicely. All right, first one in. Woo! Take a look at that. Oh, you can see everything on this side. All right, let's get these other two wired. I normally like to hold off till I'm done with a project to really take a step back and see the end result. I don't know why, it's just more satisfying that way. But for some reason with this project, I needed that little bit of motivation to make sure that these lights were going to be a good improvement in brightness and location. You know, they're in a much better spot than the old ones were, and they are a lot brighter, and they should consume similar or even less power, being that they're LEDs versus standard bulbs. So I went ahead and worked on finishing up the wiring. This side's a little tricky because I'm tying these two together, so I've got to do basically a double crimp down to a single, but other than that, pretty straightforward process to get these in. All right, here we go. Woo! Look at that, dude. Nice. That is sick. Look at that. You can see everything now. So if we need to work on this thing on the side of the road at night, we just flick that one switch, and now we can see the front of the engine, the pulley area, the side over here with the turbo and everything, and then the side over here all the way up in here with all these lines. So that is perfect. Sick. Stoked on that. But I wanted to do that for a bit. Yeah.
I just wanted to flip the switch.
So after Josue took his turn flipping the switch, I went ahead and started working on tidying up this wiring, getting it all secured and out of the way, so that way that's done and dusted. And then we started working on our super elaborate routing for this way too long set of lines. So we had to kind of get creative here and go the long way around to find a way to get these to not be just a tangled mess or circled up somewhere. But we got it. We got them back from A to B. We've got them routed where they're away from all the things that could cause them harm. And now we just need to get them hooked up. Now, this is a messy, messy job. It is oil pouring out the whole time. But it's a pretty easy process to hook these up back here because there's a lot more room to get to everything than there is up front. So all in all, not too bad. All right, well, I'd say the work lights were a worthwhile investment. You can see much better in here than just having to shine a light everywhere you're looking. But the lines are rough routed, rough tucked. We need to get back further under there to tie them up kind of in the middle section between here and the cabinets. But we need to drive the bus up on some blocks because it's low. But we've got them going where they need to go. They loop around, boom, down, and then into the reservoir and into the pump. So I think we're good. For them being a little bit long, I think the routing worked out where they're not in the way and they're not in harm's way. So anyway, jibber jabber, we're going to fill this thing with as much as we can, and then we're going to have to fire it up and just keep topping it off because it's going to take a lot. The other annoying thing is it's a pain to fill in this bus because of where the reservoir is. You don't have a lot of height above it. So it's a little tricky, but we'll get it done. So we went ahead and put as much fluid as we could in this thing before we attempted to start it up. So we started the process of topping it off, starting it, getting it to suck somewhere in, turning it off, starting it up, topping it off, and see if we could get this thing primed. At least 1.5 gallons, because we split this one up. I would say a solid 5 quarts, at least. But I mean, it's a big system with very, 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 very long lines. This will be our third start, fourth start. I guess I'll let it run and we'll maybe try to keep filling it while it's running. Back in the bus. I don't like starting this thing and turning it off a bunch of times, but don't want to burn the pump up either. Still got no power steering. Is it full?
Doesn't seem like it.
I'm not getting anything up there. I'm wondering if it's our line routing. I just feel like we'd be getting something.
I feel like power steering is one of those things, like, it's not working, then all of a sudden it's just working.
Yeah.
Right? It's trying to do something, because this time around it puked. And I could see you, when you were trying to turn the wheel, I could see it trying to come up.
All right, well, it's not taking in any more fluid, so we're gonna see if we can bleed it up here. We're not 100% on which one of these is the bleeder. If either of them is the bleeder, they both look like adjustment screws to me, and I don't see why the bleeder would be on the bottom. So what we're gonna try to do is crack this bigger, this should be the return line loose, and see if we can bleed some out of there. Where it's not taking in any more fluid, so there's got to be air trapped in there or something. The only other thing I'm worried about is being that this was swapped. I'm afraid that the lines flip at some point on the way up. So the small line turns into the big line and the big line turns into the small line. Right now we have small, small, big, big. Basically small is feed, big is return, which makes sense. So I'm hoping that's not the case, but we're gonna try to crack this line loose, fire it up, see what happens. So we spent some time trying to bleed it. We cracked the line loose. We were getting fluid out of there, so we know we're getting fluid up to the front. We really need to crank the wheels from left to right. That's how you normally bleed a power steering system, is you jack it up and turn from lock to get all of the air out of, in this case, the steering box. However, we can't really do that because I don't have 2 jacks that are powerful enough to lift this thing up. So I'm trying to run it and just back it up and drive it forward so that I can turn. There's no turning these wheels with this thing just sitting static. If you have a little bit of motion, you can do it, but nothing's seeming to help. We're not getting, there's no change at all in our power steering. So something is wrong. All right, well, we haven't been able to get this thing to bleed or do anything. We're consulting the manual. It seems to be full of fluid. So it's kind of tricky, but Osway was looking at it here. So this, basically, from what we can tell, it is potential that our fear that they flipped somewhere on their routing was the case.
It looks like it's the feed and then return. So it's like when you flip it over, there's your full.
Because this is our feed. Anyway, it seems like the lines might, which, it's like, come on. I was worried about that because since this is swapped, I thought maybe those lines back there might be like an intermediate line type of deal.
It's funny. It's like, how are we supposed to know? And looking in the forums, I saw somebody like did that. I was like, oh, it's fine. We're fine. I think we did it.
It's like big to big, small to small, you would think.
I guess not.
Apparently not.
According to the diagram. To be continued?
To be continued. All right, so to confirm our diagnosis on the lines potentially being flipped, you can see our repair job on this one when we're on the side of the road. I'm gonna put a little bit of air to this one. This is a larger one, and put my phone in the back and see which one it comes out of. If it comes out of the larger one, we know the lines aren't flipped. If it comes out of the smaller one, we know the lines are flipped, and we need to get some fittings to flip them back. I'm kind of hoping that's the case because that would answer our question, but I'm obviously hoping it's not the case because we've already got it all set up this way, so we'll see. All right, well, that answers that. So at some point on the way up here, they flipped. Now, this is a thought I had when we were getting these lines made, because at some point that engine was swapped in. So I thought maybe they made a new line, and then, you know, there's an attachment point somewhere, and that definitely obviously is the case. That's okay though, because we can fix this. So the plan is to basically get some adapter hoses. We're gonna go from our 10 down to an 8 so we can hook this line up at the power steering pump, and then we're gonna go from our 8 up to a 10 so we can hook that line up at the reservoir, because that is actually our return and this is actually our feed, or our pressure out. Now the other thing that's nice is we used 1/2-inch hose on both, so it's not like we're going from a big hose to a small hose and we need the big hose and we're going to cause restriction. It should be fine. The only annoyance is that these lines are already so long, so much longer than they needed to be, and now we're going to be making them a little bit longer because it's the quickest option to fix it. But if we fix it, I'm going to be happy. So that being said, my parts guy is going above and beyond. He's going in on his day off to make me this pair of lines and bring them over. He's a really cool guy. His name's Kenny. And so, yeah, we should hopefully have what we need to switch this and get it working correctly. So now it was time for the messy job of trying to swap these lines and minimize the fluid loss. You know, we've got it probably bled just in reverse, so I don't want to dump all the fluid out and have to start that process all over again, but obviously that's a little bit challenging. Now, this is not the ideal scenario. The ideal setup would be to have had the lines made right in the first place. But the second ideal scenario would be to use some adapter fittings. So it's just a fitting, not the line. But the line was what I could get done quickly, at O'Reilly's. Again, shout out to Kenny for taking care of that. He made the lines, which it's not like he made the lines wrong, but he was able to get me these on super short notice so that we could try to get this thing sorted. I hate going to sleep at night knowing a project that I intended on having finished is unfinished. So I get the bottom one swapped, get covered in oil. I tried to pull the fitting out of the reservoir because it's leaking a little bit so I could re-thread tape it, but it's in there. I didn't want to risk breaking it trying to get it off, so I cut my losses. I went ahead and got that hooked up, and then started filling it. Now, luckily, we figured out a better method for filling it than we did when we were on the road. Instead of using the whole oil jug, we're using this old empty brake fluid container. It's a lot easier to get up in there and pour. There's just not a lot of height above the reservoir because we're, underneath the floor of the bus, so this helps. This works a lot better. All right, moment of truth time. Hopefully we've got power steering off rip, and we just need to top it off to finish bleeding it, but we will find out. Oh, let's go! Oh, yes! Oh, I gotta take a video to send to Josue. Hold on. He's not here because he's busy, so he's gotta see this moment. Look at it! Would you just look at it though, Josue? Look at it. Woo! Whew. I'm beat. Alright, cool. I should have checked that. I thought about it when we were taking everything apart because, I noticed the lines at the back were different. The line material and the fitting type, the front, they're both crimped. The back, one was thread together like what we use on the race cars for like the Earl's power steering stuff. So I thought about it. I'm like, what if they... they're probably junction somewhere. What if they switch, But I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why would they switch? They switch. So, in hindsight, knowing everything we know now, we could have done this a lot nicer. We could have gone probably about 10 feet shorter on the lines. At least I would say 5, maybe 8. Probably 5. We could have gone 5 feet shorter on the lines and basically switched the fittings, and it would have been on the money. But we got it done. We now have power steering. We have brand new lines, and we know for next time if these ever fail. So I'm going to get this thing buttoned up so I can at least putt it around a little bit. It's going to be kind of tricky getting it out of here by myself, but I want to make sure it drives good. Haven't driven this thing with working power steering in a bit now. Well, proper working. All right, well, before we close this up, though, what we're going to do is we're going to use our same air method here and basically blow all the fluid out of each lines into a container, so that way the lines are at least mostly empty before we wrap this up, and then we'll try to cap them as best we can. So after getting the lines blown out and capped off and secured up and out of the way, don't get me wrong, it pains me to leave those lines in there, which is why it's something I didn't think of originally when we were stranded on the side of the road. That could have been a fix where we could have got this thing to our destination. We went to an O'Reilly's that made lines, which is exactly where we had these lines made. So we could have done it this way then. My brain doesn't work like that. Leaving the old lines in is just not something that comes to mind. But someone mentioned it in a comment, and I was like, you know what? That's actually probably the best way to do this than trying to tear the whole bus apart. So it pains me, but they're in there. And hey, worst case, if we blow a line out, they work. They just leak. So once we got that done and out of the way, it was time to close this thing back up, front and back, get our headlight assembly back in, and put it to work. All right. Well, with that, the bus is more or less back together. We've still got a little bit to do on the line front. We need to finish securing the lines in the middle here just to make sure they're tucked up and away from heat. We do have more mechanical things that I'd like to tackle for sure before we take this thing on another trip. I want to do all of the belts back here, obviously all new fluids and filters for the engine, the transmission. We've already done the generator. Just go through it, tip to tail, like we intended to do before we started driving it. But next up, I've got a bunch of stuff I've been waiting to tackle, and I'm excited for it. Some upgrades, some lighting upgrades for like the cabinets and inside, and we've got some upgrades for the bathroom, and out here we've got a bunch of upgrades that I want to do. So what we're going to do to test out the power steering is move this thing back to its kind of standard spot. That way we can plug it into the house and everything can get charged up and we have the full functionality, because we still got to sort out the generator situation. So if you know anybody or anyone in Central Florida who works on these RV diesel style generators, let me know. I'm going to continue diagging it myself, see if I can figure it out, but I'd love to take it to someone and have them just refresh everything so that way we know this thing's sorted. It gets used on a race weekend. It starts up here in the driveway and doesn't turn off till we pull back in. So definitely be worth having it gone through to make sure it's tip top before our next trip. But jibber jabber, really, I cannot tell you how relieved I am to have that power steering line situation taken care of. I have been dreading that project, and it really was nowhere near as bad as I thought. If we should have done a little bit more due diligence, I noticed that the lines were different back there. I should have done the air test to check which one was which. I thought about it, but I thought there's no way that they would flip midway, up the bus where you can't see them. There's no way. Yes way. So always do your due diligence. The lesson of the day, better to check than find out the hard way like we did. But we got it sorted. We now have power steering. I'm excited to test it out by moving the bus back to its spot. So I'm going to quit jibber jabbering. We're obviously almost out of daylight. And get this thing cranked up, get it moved. All right, well, it's plugged in now. The bus is officially fixed and a fully functional bus again. We can use it. We can take it to the track. Obviously, we still got to fix the generator, but if we didn't have that fixed, we could still use it. And that is, whew, I can't tell you how nice of a feeling that is. As I said, I was dreading that project. So to have it done, I'm so excited. I'm so happy. It feels really good to get back into tinkering with the bus again. It's got me extra hyped to get back to work on that thing and start dialing in all of the upgrades and the refitting and all of the stuff that we have planned for it. You know, it kind of got pushed to the wayside because we had other projects to deal with, and you know, we were having issues, so we just kind of out of sight, out of mind for a bit while we tackled other stuff. But it's time to get back to work on that thing and get it dialed in for next season. I love that thing. I mean, I love it, but then when I get in it and I drive it and I move it around and I hang out in it, it gets me even that much more hyped on it. It is such a cool setup. I'm so glad we have it, and I'm so excited for what's to come with it. All the stuff we have planned, it should be a really, really neat rig by the time we're done with it. So that being said, I'm gonna quit jibber jabbering. I'm gonna get back to work on cleaning up the shop because this place is a mess right now, and clutter drives me insane. Gotta do a refresh after a project. So I'm gonna clean this up, and I'm gonna let you guys go. So that being said, thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I sure hope I'll get to see you next time. Goodbye.